speaker view.
It's recording. I'm going to wait, stop the recording.
The name Anu, which of course is we, it's like Anachnu, it means we. And one of the things that I think is so special about this museum is that it is truly reflective of we, of the breadth and the depth and the beauty of the Jewish people. And I have heard a story about one of my colleagues, Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, who's the obviously female rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York, who is featured in the exhibit, you know, alongside the, what people think of sometimes, you know, the typical, the ultra-Orthodox, you know, rabbis with the long payas and the black coats, and everyone in between, just that there's space for everybody at Anu, just as there's space for everybody in the Jewish community and among the Jewish people. So that's one of the many things I'm so excited about, but I'm very happy to stop talking now so that we can hear from our speakers who will tell us about the museum and about the vision behind it. So thank you so much for letting me introduce, and thank you to our speakers in advance, and thank you again to Nina for bringing us all together so beautifully this morning.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Elaine. I want to introduce Shulamid Bahat, who is CEO of Anu America. She obviously is representing the Museum of the Jewish People in North America. She retired from the American Jewish Committee as Associate Executive Director after 31 years. She, in fact, served as an acting director and was elected in 2001 to Forward 50 as the highest ranking woman and Israeli in American Jewish organizational life. She served for years as an IDF career officer involved in education and research and reached the rank of captain. She has a BA in sociology and political science from Hebrew University, an MA in urban planning from the Technion, and postgraduate work from the University of Pennsylvania. Shula, I am so delighted to have you and Lindsay here. Please introduce Lindsay.
Thank you very much. And before I introduce Lindsay, who is going to be our guide today, I wanted to tell you that Dan Tadmor, our CEO, was supposed to join us, fell ill. So many people in Israel and in the United States these days do get the flu or any other virus that is around. So he would not be able to be with us today. However, I hope that we and you will give him a rain shake for another opportunity. Rabbi Elaine, thank you for your wonderful, wonderful comments. As a matter of fact, you saved us some time because there are some certain comments that I'm not going to make in view of the fact that you made them and it's better coming from you. And thank you, Nina, for bringing us all together. I will thank Lindsay later on. And also Gloria, my colleague, who is also behind everything that we do here in this country. So I can tell you that after so many years in different careers, I think what I'm doing now in Anu, the Museum of the Jewish People, is probably going to be the climax of my career. There is nothing, in my opinion, more important than sharing the vision of the Museum of the Jewish People, Anu, the Museum of the Jewish People, which some of you may know is Bet Hatfutzot, or the Museum of the Diaspora. Nothing more important to sharing that it is your story that we are telling. It is the story of the people, of the Jewish people, but it is a story of every Jew, and not just Jews. It is a place that appeals to many people, Jews and non-Jews alike. As a matter of fact, just recently, there were two delegations that came to the museum. One of them was a delegation from the Emirates, who came to see the museum and were overwhelmed, as did another delegation of ambassadors to the UN, who often don't vote for Israel, who were astonished by what they learned about Jewish history, Jewish identity, the connection between Jews all over the world. And I think this is a very important aspect of what we are doing. Much of it will be told to you today by Lindsay, but I can tell you, this is the largest Jewish museum in the world. with 72,000 square feet, and there is no way that anyone can see it in one call, or for that matter, in one meeting. And it is now, as it used to be, a must. And it is so much of the must that, notwithstanding the pandemic, since we opened in March of this year, no, I'm sorry, of March of last year, of 2021, 200,000 people came to visit the museum. And not just people from Israel, people really from all over the world, as I mentioned earlier. And we are very, very, very proud of the fact that we get unbelievable comments on people's visit that do find themselves. It is the story, not just of the Jewish people, but of every one of us who makes up the Jewish people and everyone who is connected to the Jewish people. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Lindsay Shapiro, who in the last moment was mobilized by me to guide us in this tour. Lindsay is responsible for all of the programming in English of the Museum of the Jewish People. And she's coming with a fantastic background in Jewish history, in Holocaust studies. She too has a BA and an MA degrees, and she worked also all over the world for various Jewish organizations, Jewish entities, such as the Polin Museum in Warsaw, the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York, Bet Elohim congregation in New York, Taglit Birthright, and Yad Vashem in Israel. So she is a cherished colleague and a very knowledgeable colleague. And Lindsay, without further ado, I'm giving you the baton. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Shula. Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Good morning to everybody here. Echoing the thanks that Shula also just shared. I'm very excited to be with everybody here on this online tour today as we get to walk through our brand new core exhibition and explore a tasting of the highlights that we've got at the museum, with the hopes that it will see everybody here in person, God willing, very soon. We're just about to start the tour itself, but I'll explain very quickly how it's going to work. I'll be sharing my screen, so we get to walk through virtually through the museum together, and you'll get to get a sense of what's happening in the museum. As we go through the tour, just like an in-person tour here at the museum, I like to make everything very interactive, and I'm always fascinated to hear about everybody else's own stories and personal reflections and how different artifacts can be meaningful to you in your lives. So I'll be asking questions and encouraging you to think about your own stories, just like Shula was saying. This is a museum of all of our stories. I'll be asking questions throughout the tour, and I'm sure there might be questions that you have as well. Please feel free to use the chat function on Zoom, which you can find if you look at the bottom of your screen. Some screens will have a little speech bubble that says chat. You can just click on that and type away, or there might be a button that says more with 3 dots on the top. Click on that and you'll see chat, and you can open it up. Feel free to respond as much as you would like. I always relish that and really love that as part of the tour. Or if you prefer to keep your thoughts to yourself, just have them in your mind as we're going through and I'm asking some of the questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started.
Lindsay, do we just want to talk about everybody going to speaker view is probably?
Thank you. Thank you. Of course. Good reminder. The best option for viewing the online tour is to go into speaker mode. In order to do so, take a look at your screen and you'll see a button on the top right that says view. It looks like a little movie clapboard and it says view. Click on view and then you'll see 2 options. I highly recommend you click the speaker option. It's the best option for viewing the tour right now. And even better is to hit full screen so you'll really be able to get a clear and good picture of what we're walking through. So again, hit view on the top right corner of your screen. There'll be a drop down, select speaker, and then even better, click full screen after that.
And if you're on an iPad, it's on the left, on the top left, you can, there's a button that says switch to gallery view or a switch to speaker view.
Thank you. A very important reminder. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our tour. So everybody should be able to see my screen right now. And we're going to go ahead and act like we're landing in Israel. and jumping right into the tour itself. So now we're just about to get started on our third floor. You see, we walked into the museum. We went up to the third floor, which is where our new core exhibition begins. Echoing all of the figures that Shula just said, we are now the largest Jewish museum in the world, and we are the only Jewish museum that collects and accurately tells the entire story of the Jewish people. So again, I encourage you to think about your own stories as we're about to get started in this museum. Now, I always love to ask, raise your hand if you've been to our museum at some point in the last 43 years. We opened up on the Tel Aviv University campus in 1978. So raise your hand either in the image or you can raise it in the chat. Always fun to see lots of hands going on, which is very exciting. And now we're opening up to the third floor of the museum, which is called the Mosaic. And here we're going to meet Jews and Jewish life from the 20th and 20th and 21st century. So we'll be seeing a lot of things that might be familiar to you. The first thing that we do when we walk into the third floor, you can see the map. Is we see families and individuals that we might find in our own Jewish communities today. And the first figure I want to stop at is a woman who lives in New York with her family, who has a very interesting story to tell.
Hi, my name is Rochi. My formal name is Rachel. I serve as a judge in the New York State court system. I was elected in 2016. I come from a Hasidic family, and I am now the mother of 6 children and also a grandmother. When I decided to pursue a legal education, most people told me it was never going to happen. We call those naysayers. And it's not true. You can achieve success and maintain your religious and even Hasidic values. I have learned that by being openly proud of my Judaism and my Hasidic background, not only did it not hold me back from success, but it actually propelled me to success. I am now sitting in court, and in every American courtroom are the words, "In God we trust." If anybody were to question me about one of my decisions, all I have to do is point to those words and say, God is watching. I have also seen that with incredible siyata dishmaya, divine providence, I was able to succeed. So instead of actually drifting further from my Judaism, I actually have become to feel more closer and connected to God. And every woman out there who wants to embark on any profession, know that you can be successful without compromising your standards.
And now we're going to go to the other coast and hear from somebody else.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Sharon Browse from a community called Ikar in Los Angeles. Years ago, I was nearing the end of my rabbinical studies, having spent many years immersed in the study of our tradition, studying Torah and Talmud 14 hours a day, when terrible floods devastated the East African country of Mozambique. And I saw an image on the front page of the paper of mothers holding their babies in their arms who had climbed to the top of 20-foot trees, holding on for dear life, waiting for rescue helicopters that would never come for them. And I became paralyzed with the realization that all of my Jewish observance, my Jewish learning meant nothing if it wasn't working to ease the suffering of human beings all around the world. So I decided to drop out of rabbinical school until a mentor of mine told me that the world needs rabbis who give a damn about the women and the babies of Mozambique. And I knew that he was right. So I went back to seminary, this time determined to understand what it means to be a Jew and a human being in a world on fire, how to build communities that are oases of love and justice. Today, I fully believe that it is our particular Jewish story, our tradition, our text, our rituals that fuel our audacious universalist vision of a world redeemed.
All right, so Oopsies, sorry about that. There we go. So we just heard from two women on opposite sides of the country, Rabbi Sharon Brous in Los Angeles and the Honorable Judge Rachel Fryer, about what it means to be Jewish for them in the world today. And if you're thinking about it, keep in mind what it means for you to be a Jew in the United States today and how that impacts your life. Now we're going to walk through the museum. We're walking past some of our families and our individuals, and we're going into different streams of Judaism. And here, like Shula said, it's important for us to point out that our museum is built for everybody, for people who are coming from Jewish backgrounds and also not Jewish backgrounds. And we absolutely keep that in mind and have built our museum in a way that it's welcoming and educational for those who are unfamiliar with different streams of Judaism, but also so that Jews from around the world can really find themselves. And as you can see in our section on streams of Judaism, you'll notice lots of images of trees. We see all of the different branches of Judaism, whether they be Orthodoxy or Reconstructionism or conservative or Reform or non-denominational. We see them as being branches on the exact same tree with the same roots that you combine us all. And we see the values that we share with one another, along with lots of other identity markers, as being strong aspects of Jewish peoplehood. In this section, you can see there's lots of videos and interactive, so visitors can really get a glimpse of what's going on here. We have short videos about different American Jews and how they've played roles in different aspects.
Something like that at all. I think
I'm just going to share one
kosher food.
We didn't push you in this direction at all. Like how?
16.
Defining what our
about the technical difficulties right now.
We didn't push you in this direction at all. Like how?
We're just finishing the video right here about the JCC in Harlem, and now we're going to hop over to Israel and meet a chayalet, or a female soldier here in the army.
I'm Rachel Eckstein. I made Aliyah 2 years ago from Passaic, New Jersey. I now serve B'Tzava as a Madrichat Totchanim. I'm from an Orthodox family. I keep halacha, I daven twice a day, I only eat kosher food, I shomeret Shabbat. But I also watch Disney movies, and I also watch other movies, and I listen to music. I can live my life with dedication to God, with religion as a guide and as a help, not as religion holding me down. I don't see religion like that at all. I think religion is a framework in which to build our lives, but there's a small part of me that's just like, yeah, I'm a religious female, and voila, ani b'tzava.
So as you can see, Rachel Eckstein is talking about her own life and her role in the Jewish world today. And a big focus on her life is tikkun olam, or repairing the world, which I can imagine is might be a big part of your Jewish identities today as American Jews, and how it's our responsibility to repair the world and make the world a better place for the next generation to come. Now, as we're moving on from streams of Judaism, I want to go to other identity markers that we see in the Jewish world today, and that, of course, is markers focused in culture. And I'm going to go to one of my favorite sections on the third floor, which is the section talking about Jewish music. Now you can see what our section looks like. On this floor, we have galleries about Jewish culture, including Jewish theater, dance, film, and music. And right now we're going to focus on the section about Jewish music. And before we get into one of the artifacts that we've got here in this section, I want to ask you a question. It can be something that you write in the chat, or it can be something that you're thinking about. What for you makes music Jewish? Is there something inherent about the singer or the text of the music or the song itself that lends itself to being in our museum? There's no right or wrong answer, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Think about as you're looking at the record covers of Bob Dylan and Amy Winehouse and Leonard Cohen, Burt Bacharach. Again, feel free to write in the chat your thoughts and your answers. What makes music Jewish? We just passed by the amazing guitar of a Haifa-born Jew, born to a Holocaust survivor in Haifa, not too far away from here in Israel. His birth name was Chaim, but later on in life, he moved to the United States, got very, very into music, and changed his stage name to something a little bit far away from Chaim, although he signs his guitar with Chaim. We're going to see it in just a moment. This singer and songwriter and pop icon would later become Gene Simmons. So we've got his guitar that he's donated to our museum here. And I like the answers that we're getting in the chat right now. Hava Nagila is an inherently Jewish song, right? There's nothing you really need to explain about it. That's something that's very Jewish. Suzanne is writing that the music would be in Hebrew, right? That has a connection to Jewish peoplehood and Jewish languages. And for anybody who hasn't written the chat, keep it in mind what exactly makes something Jewish. And now we're about to focus on the piece that I really love in this section, which is an incredible costume worn by the late Israeli singer and musician Ofra Chaza. Ofra Chaza was born in 1957 in Tel Aviv to parents who had immigrated from Yemen. As an Israeli, she brought in her own personal identity and ethnic background into her music and her song styles. And this captured the hearts of Israelis everywhere because she incorporated Yemenite songs and tunes into her music and also wore incredible costumes that reflected her own family's background. Marcy's writing in there, klezmer, excellent. I'm surprised nobody's written that yet. Klezmer is absolutely one of those very identifiable Jewish styles of music. Jan Pierce. Robin's also writing good feedback in here. And now we're going to move on from our section about Jewish music into Jewish folklore. Also, Steve is writing the minor key melodies, right? Hatikva is the only national anthem written in a minor key. Something very inherently Jewish about that. Now we're going to look at folklore of the museum and look at what exactly makes something an object that we use every day important in our lives. If we're looking at markers of culture, such as music and film and languages and our own identities, these are things that come up every day in our everyday lives. Now I want to take a look at a couple of items of folklore that we also might use in our everyday lives or our weekly lives or monthly lives that also tell a story in the same way that music does. Here's an incredible art piece that we have on the third floor. It's called Kiddush to Go. It's done by an artist, Eric Weiss. And as you can see, it's made out of golden cups that look very similar to a coffee to go cup that we're very familiar with. And they're stationed in a golden handle or carrying case that somebody can take with them. It's a really clever piece that a lot of us recognize as being symbols that we see every day, but this is marking that in today's day and age, we oftentimes don't have enough time to sit down for a long meal, that we're taking our things with us, and we're even taking our traditions or Shabbat with us, just like we're taking this Kiddush to go cup on the way. Now, as we walk through the rest of the third floor, we're going to get to the end of the third floor where we see our gallery on luminaries. And in our luminaries section, we've identified Jews who have made a positive impact, not only to their own families or their own immediate communities, but really the world at large. And we've got elements of Estee Lauder in here, of Diane von Furstenberg, of Arthur Elbaz, of Levi Strauss, of Daniel Libeskind, lots of different influential people. And now we're going to focus on one of the hottest objects that we've got on the third floor, an object that might be familiar to you as American Jews. We can see we have one of the white collars, one of the descent collars of the late US Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg donated this collar as well as a signed copy of her autobiography to our museum, which we were very happy and proud to have here. Now, why do we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg in here? For a couple of reasons. And why do we bring her here in this highlights tour? Ruth Bader Ginsburg embodied the idea of serving one's community. She was well known for having the saying, printed on her wall, tzedek, tzedek, teodov, or justice, justice, thou shalt pursue. And she mentioned this and referenced it when meeting with other justices or other members of her team. Ruth was also a very proud American Jew. And in an interview, she once asked somebody, what is the difference between a grocery store clerk and a US Supreme Court justice? The answer is 1 generation. And she spoke about how her family's pride at her becoming a US Supreme Court justice or becoming such an influential member of the legal community in the United States when her parents and her father actually was a grocery store clerk in Brooklyn where she grew up. And as we're heading down to the second floor, I want you to continue to think about what makes somebody a luminary and what important qualities would grant somebody access to this floor. And for those of you who would like to write in the chat who you would add to our Luminaries gallery. What important figure do you know of that you would add to ours here? Now we're going to head down to the second floor. Now that we've seen the mosaic of the Jewish world around us today, we're going to walk downstairs and look at the second floor called the Masa, or the journey. Now we're about to encounter Jewish communities from all over the world. And here's a fun question that I always like to ask. If you feel comfortable doing so, write in the chat where your families are from before the United States. Which countries are they from? Where are your roots from? And we'll see if we can touch on some of those places as we go out throughout the second floor. Again, write in the chat where your families are from. Austria, Hungary. Our answers are already coming in. Russia and Belarus and Poland. And Russia and Poland, the Netherlands and Germany and Odessa and Russia, very, very cold places. That's why you're all living in Florida now, because you're sick of being in the cold. Your genes need some warmth and some sunshine. Vienna and Russia, Romania, Bessarabia, Poland and Russia, amazing. So we're getting a lot of the similar places. Algeria as well, Austria and Russia. Okay, maybe we were all neighbors 150 years ago. So think about your own stories as we explore this wall right here. This wall is called the Wall of Communities. There are 50 portraits here. Each portrait is an individual that represents a different Jewish community. All of these portraits were done by a singular artist. Her name is Lena Rebenkov. She is a Belarusian Ola, or immigrant to Israel, and she did every single one of them. Each one of these portraits tells a story. And visitors can also take a look, as you can see these visitors right here, are taking a look at the interactives to learn about different Jewish communities around the world. I like that Emma Lazarus, thank you, Fran. We're gonna get to her as we go throughout the tour. We can't forget Emma Lazarus, but an important reminder to add here as well. And Lynn also is adding in Latvia to our communities. Now, before we're about to jump into the floor about Jewish history, there's an important installation that we always like to highlight. This installation was done by artist Carol Hamoy, and it's called the Clear Dresses. Now, this installation features multiple clear dresses of different shape and sizes. Alongside the wall, you can see there's small pieces of paper in the frame that list 100 names of women who are referenced in Jewish texts throughout history. And the importance of this wall cannot go understated. This wall is meant to show that throughout history, there are many figures that were transparent, just as these clear dresses are transparent. And we have to remember that as we're learning about history, the lives and the roles of women were oftentimes not documented, as women were many times not educated on the same level as their male peers, or their names were not written down. And as we go throughout this tour, I encourage us all to remember and to think about those figures that might go transparent in life. Thank you also for adding the late Rabbi Sachs to our Luminaries gallery as well, which I highly, highly support. Now we're looking at the first section on our Masa floor about Jewish centers of antiquity, which include the land of Israel, Babylon, and Alexandria. And we're looking at the influence of these, really the first diasporas throughout the Jewish world. And we're about to, and you can see in our gallery as we're walking around, there's lots of different interactives. There's places to touch and to watch and to listen and to engage ourselves in this type of history. And we're going to focus on one artifact in particular. Let us get to it in just a moment. As you can see, we're going on to the different artifacts that we've got here. We're about to see an incredible incantation bowl from the 5th to the 7th century CE. These bowls were considered to be good luck charms and were made out of clay with an inscription written in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic. Here we've got our bowl right here. There's also the picture of the angel Sarfi, who is protecting the home of Kanfai ben Ima and his wife Imai, Bat Anai. We can see the names written on the bowl alongside the incantation for the protection from demons were depicted in the bowl itself. These bowls were oftentimes buried under the threshold of the home's door to trap and propel any bad spirits away from the home. I can imagine lots of us are thinking about the parallels in our own lives. Write in the chat now if you've got any other objects that you have in your home or spaces that you frequent that are sort of good luck charms. I know on my keychain with all of my keys, I have a Hamsa with the traveler's prayer on top of it. Many of you have probably seen that at some shops here in Israel, but that's one charm that I carry along with me as well. Now we're going to fast forward in history because that's how we work at the museum. That's really what this tour is about. It's really a tasting tour. We're going to go to early modern history. Really, when can you do this? When can you jump from early antiquity to the early modern period? A jump of over 1,000 years in just a couple of seconds. We're going to the early modern period of Poland and Lithuania and the Ottoman Empire. So those of you who said that your families were from Poland and Lithuania or the Ottoman Empire, we've got something for you right here. And we're talking about important figures and how their roles in the Jewish community and also outside of the Jewish community impacted the world around them. And as we're focusing on different areas of Jewish life, I want to point out that we recognize these were not the only areas of Jewish life at the time. We went from centers of antiquity. We passed over the areas talking about Ashkenaz and Sfarad. Now we're in the early modern period. We know that Jews at this time, during the Renaissance, lived outside of Poland, Lithuania, and the Ottoman Empire. Of course they did. However, the largest sections and concentrations of Jewish life at this time were here. Now I want you to meet somebody or perhaps revisit somebody you already are familiar with, an incredible, incredible woman named Dona Grazia who lived during this time period and had a major influence not only on her own community, but also on our life today.
Our story begins in Lisbon 500 years ago. Not only for Jews was this a dark time, for even the brightest of women were forbidden to shine. Dona Garcia Mendes was such a woman, a young widow and a Jew. She managed a company trading in spice and saffron, a successful merchant and a career mom. But the church had the power to demand that as a Jew her faith she must recant. This was something Donna could not do, so to Belgium she fled to begin anew. There she was renowned, respected and revered. Her business flourished, trading far and near. With her sister now partner by her side, they established a bank and continued to thrive. The king of the lowlands in their affairs did pry, eager for their wealth, to take it he tried. Yet shrewd Donna would not give in, took her riches and sailed with the wind. In Venice she could live and trade freely, for there as equals they treated the Jews. She became known as Donna Nasi, which means leader or president in Hebrew. Whenever Donna spoke, men would listen. She commanded a merchant fleet, ransomed innocent in prison, translated the Bible with such a sharp mind into Ladino, the language Jews spoke at the time. The Turkish Sultan was sincerely impressed. He admired her so that he invited her to his address. When her ship moored at his famous city, he gave her a crown and treated her like royalty. Donna lent money and funded the Sultan's wars. She even helped the needy, the frail, and the poor. As for her fellow Jews who still had no home, she leased the city of Tiberias to call it their own.
All right, so here we get to see the story of Dona Grazia and the sea, who had an impact on the world around her, and also leased and owned the city of Tveria, which many of you, I can imagine, have visited on your trips to Israel. Now we're moving on through the gallery and we're going to enter into the modern era. And here we're looking at the open gates of modernity. We're talking about the period from the 18th century into the early 20th century. And we're seeing high levels of liberation of Jews living in Central, Western, Eastern Europe, as well as North Africa and the Middle East. And we are walking through this rotunda and we meet 4 families in the same way that we saw families in the very beginning of the museum. Now we're meeting 4 different families that can accurately reflect trends in the Jewish world at this time. Again, we're talking about the 18th to the early 20th centuries. And in these 4 portraits that we're just about to visit, we can see trends of the Jewish world. And I want you to think about which family portrait would you be standing in if we were 150 years ago? Thinking again about those places that you said your families were from. Jews in Central and Western Europe are becoming integrated. You can see in this family portrait, they're wearing very much Western stylish clothing, and they're becoming integrated, exploring other economic options, and able to integrate more with their non-Jewish neighbors. A little bit further to the east, Jews in Central and Eastern Europe are moving from the shtetl to the big city. And in this family portrait, just like the first one, we see multiple generations, but we can notice the different styles of clothing that they're wearing, where the older generations in the very front are wearing traditional clothing, and the younger generations next to them or behind them are wearing very fashionable, relatively modern clothing for the time period. Now we're going over to the third of the 4 sections of Jews in Islamic countries. And we can see also the incredible clothing and how this tells a story, the clothing that would have been worn by Jews living in Northern Africa and the Middle East. And in just a moment, we're about to hear from the chief curator at the museum, Dr. Orit Shochem-Gover, about a fantastic piece that we've got that really tells a story much bigger than the object itself. Which is this pendant, which in reality is quite small, but tells a big story.
This small medallion has a huge story. It belonged to the great-great-great-grandmother of the woman who loaned it to our collection. This grandmother lived in Mashhad, Iran, in a time where the Jews were forced to become Muslims. If you look closely, you can see at the center of the medallion a painting of Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, the Muslim prophet. Now, during the 200 years in which the Jews of Mashhad lived as crypto-Jews, the women used to smuggle Torah scrolls and prayer books under their gowns to bring them to the places where the men were praying. In order to not look suspicious on the street, they used to hang this medallion on their neck. So we can assume the great-great-great-grandmother of our lender was one of those women.
Now, again, Orit was telling this incredible story of this piece that was smuggled out of Mashhad, Iran, and made it to our museum generations later. Now, if anybody here has a story like that that you carry with your family about a particular object that was smuggled or hidden or stolen away that made it to your generation, please write about it in the chat. If there's an object that you have in your home today that tells a story such as this. And while you're writing it, I want to walk over to the 4th section here in our area about modernity, into a section that might be very close to a lot of our hearts. And here we're looking at the Great Migration, where we know from 1880 to 1917, over 2 million Jews fled their homes from Central and Eastern Europe and made their way to North America, landing largely in the United States, but also Canada and other countries as well. And here we're really focusing on the development and growth of the American Jewish community. Now, do me another favor, write in the chat what year your family came to the United States. And as you can see, we're looking at this wall right here behind these visitors of the Great Hall in Ellis Island, which was very close to the Statue of Liberty, which of course, for Fran, who mentioned Emma Lazarus to go in our Luminaries gallery, We know that on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty is an excerpt from Emma Lazarus's poem as well. And here we're focusing and talking about American Jews. Thank you everybody who's writing in the chat. Lots of years going on so far, early 1900s, 1862 a while ago, 1947, 1912, 1910, 1907, 1890, a lot of years right here. And it's interesting that a lot of these years are quite similar to one another. And also the places that you said your families were from were also very similar. Now we've got lots of really fantastic objects that reflect the story of the American Jewish community. And I want to focus on one in particular. This is the bat and the ball of pitcher Sandy Koufax, who was the youngest person to be inaugurated into the Baseball Hall of Fame, but also very famously in 1965, refused to pitch the first game of the World Series because it fell on Yom Kippur. Now, I don't need to tell you the importance of his refusal to pitch at the World Series because I can imagine you already know it as well. But when we're talking about the museum and the stories that our museum is telling, the importance that we place on a baseball bat is just as high as we place on a religious object, because we know all of these objects tell the stories of what makes us a people. Now, as we're about to walk just across the section here, just a couple of feet away, lies this Hanukiah, which was designed by Manfred Anson, a German-born Jew who in the 1960s moved to the United States and created this incredible Hanukiah. This was created in 1986 on the birth date of the 100th birthday of the installation of the Statue of Liberty. And each one of these small statues that we've got right here, the small statues of Liberty, all 9 of them, at the bottom, there's an important place or important event that happened in the Jewish calendar, from the destruction of the Second Temple to the establishment of the State of Israel and everything in between. A copy of this Hanukiah was lit at the White House in 2013. And thank you again, everybody who's writing these fantastic stories in the chat. These are all incredibly important. Suzanne, your mother once babysat for Sandy Koufax. That's quite an exciting client there. I wonder if they stayed in touch after all of those years. It'd be great if yes. So again, thank you everybody for writing in the chat here. And now we're about to go over to a very different section of the Masa floor. Because this is a tasting tour about our highlights, we won't be focusing on every single thing that's in the museum. I recognize that we're about to skip over an important section of Jewish history. We're passing by the events of the 1930s, 40s, which include the rise of fascism in Germany, the Second World War, and the Holocaust and murder of 6 million Jews, and also the later on expulsion of Jews from North Africa and in the Middle East at the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. So after we've zoomed through all of that history, we get to the end right here. Just a few moments ago, we were talking about the ancient land of Israel and Babylon, and now we're looking at the state of Israel, where after 2,000 years, in 1948, the state of Israel was established, the first time in 2 millennia that Jews had an autonomous state to live in. And in our gallery here, we recognize that we're not the Israel Museum. It's not our job to completely tell the entire story of Israel. However, we want to engage our visitors, and we think this is a really fun way of doing so. So here we see Israel in the numbers. And we have lots of fun facts, such as 1 in every 225 Israelis is a taxi driver. And 1 out of every 325 Israelis is a doctor. And we're going to get to my favorite statistic in just a moment. 89% of Israelis claim to be content with their lives, which is a pretty high number, we have to say. Now we're going to just be zooming past. I see we're just going past the Declaration of Independence, of Israeli independence. We're going to be focusing on an area at the very end of this gallery, at the end of the second floor. Like Shula mentioned as well, at our museum, we hope that every person finds themselves in the museum itself and finds themselves in the galleries. And we don't want anybody to leave without finding themselves. So we have a fantastic installation at our museum called com.unity. And afterwards, I'll send everybody the links so that you can take a look at it as well. Com.unity is an installation that we have at the museum that's really a living installation. It's based also on our databases, which are some of the largest databases in the Jewish world. So any visitor can come to our museum or can access this through our website, can upload their own community page. So you can upload a page for Temple Emanu-El in Sarasota, and it'll be uploaded to the gallery here. So any other future visitors or yourself as well can find yourself in the museum, physically find yourself and pictures in the museum as well. And again, I'll send a link after the call here, and I'll also put it in the chat in just a few moments for you to access the site, upload a page, and if we have a few minutes at the end, I can show you more of what it looks like. As you may have noticed already, a big part of our museum is the ability to have fun and to touch and to play with things. That's a big focus of our museum. We don't want to be somebody who can only look at things behind glass. We want everybody to become engaged with it. And that's why a lot of the screens are touchscreen and available to be played with. Now that we've gone through the mosaic of the Jewish world today and look at the Jewish Masa or journey, now we're going to head downstairs to the first floor to look at the foundations of Jewish life. And we can see, for those of you who have been to the museum before, you might recognize the same structure that we had in the previous museum that was here. Here on the first floor, we're looking at the foundations that mark Jewish life. And on our floor, we see elements of holidays of the Jewish calendar year. You can see there's lots of artist installations that tell the story of the cycle of the year that we've got right here, which include birth, bar bat mitzvah, wedding, and of course, at the end, death. But all of these pieces are influential in telling the story of how we commemorate these points on the calendar year and these points of life. We can also see different Jewish texts, and we get to see how the Bible has influenced world culture. And as we're going through, Sandy has a fantastic question in the chat. How are we handling the touchscreens during COVID? It's a great question. Anybody who comes into the museum or on the campus is required to have either a vaccination certificate or proof of recovery from COVID or a negative PCR test. And we also have an incredible building staff that cleans the museum multiple times a day to make sure that all protections are taken. And at lots of different stations, we've got hand sanitizer as well. And if somebody doesn't feel comfortable doing so, they don't need to use the interactives. They can have a great museum experience without touching any of the screens. We can see also in our museum, we're focusing on the influence of Jewish texts and values on the world around us, not just in popular culture, but also in political and social movements as well. Now, for those of you who have raised your hand and said you had been to the previous museum, to Beit HaTfutzot, at some point in history, I want to take a walk down memory lane a little bit and show you a gallery that we have renovated completely that features some of the most beloved artifacts of Beit HaTfutzot from the past. Now we're taking a look at Hallelujah, Synagogues Past and Present, which is a fantastic gallery that we have and is really beloved by everybody that comes to the museum. We focus different synagogue models from around the world. Here we have 24 synagogue models and also touchscreens as well that anybody can come and visit and take a look at. Synagogues from all over the world, from all different backgrounds that tell incredible, incredible stories. And in just a moment, we're going to focus on one of the synagogues in particular, not this one, but in just a moment, we're going to take a look at a different synagogue, which is right here. This was the Great Synagogue of Warsaw, Poland. It was opened up in 1878. and it was destroyed following the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in May of 1943. This had seating for over 2,000 people at its height, and was really the center of Warsaw Jewish life. Now, unfortunately, the synagogue was destroyed. However, we still have an incredible piece of the synagogue, the actual Hanukiah, that one of them that stood on the inside of the synagogue on the bima. Now, many people might be asking, if the synagogue was destroyed, how is this Hanukiah, which I don't know if you can tell from the image, is incredibly tall. It's over 6 feet tall and is incredibly heavy. How did we manage to have that? So there's a fantastic story that goes behind it. The rabbi of the synagogue in 1940, as the war is progressing and as the building of the Warsaw Ghetto is continuing, he has a sense of foreboding, of really imagining what's about to happen. He was able to save certain religious objects and important documents from the synagogue, including two of the Hanukiot that we have right here. There were two of them. We're looking at one of them. He was able to hide them, to take them to a secret underground hiding place. He was then able to approach the Polish ambassador to Sweden and asked him, is there somebody who would buy these Hanukiot? How would he be able to make sure that they would be saved, even though the synagogue might not be? His goal was to take the money that was used to buy the Hanukiot in order to help Jews escape Warsaw. The ambassador was successful in his search, and he found a willing purchaser in Marguerite Wenner-Gren, and whose husband, Axel, had founded the electronics company and was already a dedicated fighter to save European Jewry. Neither of them were Jewish. Marguerite was an American opera singer who was originally from St. Louis, and her husband, Axel, who was Swedish. They both purchased the Hanukiot and were able to take them out of Warsaw to safekeeping. Years after the war, in 1960, the Wenner-Grens met Sir Isaac Wolfson, a businessman and philanthropist who headed Britain's Orthodox Jewish community and was heavily involved in establishing various new institutions in Jerusalem. And he described to them these plans for the new seat of Israel's chief rabbinate to be named Heichal Shlomo, after his father, for a great synagogue to be built next to it. And moved by this vision, Marguerite, the opera singer from St. Louis, decided to donate the Hanukiot for placement in the new synagogue. So fortunately, we have them here with us in Israel today, and visitors of the museum can come and take a look at them as well. Suzanne also has a great question here. What happened to the many other artifacts that were evacuated from the Great Synagogue of Warsaw? Some of them were destroyed and some of them were able to be found after the war, but there's not a great lot of documentation of what happened to them. So here we're wrapping up our tour. We're just about to finish, and we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the Jewish world today in our mosaic. We've gone downstairs to look at the Jewish Masa and the journey around the Jewish world. And we've also taken a look at the foundations that bind us all together as Jews. So I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. Thank you to the leadership of Temple Emanu-El for having us on at this call. And thank you for all of the participants for joining us and also for sharing bits of your own personal lives and stories for us to learn together. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. If anybody has any other questions that they would like to ask, feel free to put them in the chat now. In the meantime, I'm going to share the link for com.unity so you can take a look at that as well. And we would love to have Temple on com.unity. With that, I wish everybody a Shavua Tov again. I hope everybody continues to be healthy and in good spirits, and we hope to see you all at the museum here in Israel sooner rather than later. Thanks again.
Lindsay, thank you so very much for a fascinating tour of this incredible museum, this new wonderful museum of the Jewish people. I know for myself personally, I can't wait to visit, and I'm sure so many other attendees are as excited as I am. So thank you. And before we end, are there any other questions? Any questions for the, just send to the chat?
I'm also going to put my email in the chat as well. If anybody has any questions they would like to send me or wants more information about the museum, I'm going to put that here as well. So feel free to reach out.
And Lindsay, the community site that what is it called again?
com.unity. And I'm going to send you my email so that Temple Emanu-El could actually join that wonderful, wonderful way of exposing who you are, the values, the vision of this first Reform synagogue, as I understand it, in Sarasota. If we have 1 second, I would like to read to you a quote by Steve Forbes, the publisher and of Forbes magazine, who, in my opinion, summarizes what this museum is all about. The Museum of the Jewish People is the most relevant, vital, and significant global venue that affected and transformed millions of people in Israel and around the world. The story and experience of people living among other peoples for millennia, sustaining their identity and core values, contributing magnificently to the general society in every arena, is most compelling, captivating, and powerful in its universal meaning and resonance. I think that the museum really accomplished what Steve Forbes see in it and what many of us see in it. I want really to invite you all to come to the museum, to see it with your own eyes. You know, if you want a special tour for your family, we can arrange for a virtual tour similar to this one, or a tour that is focusing on one particular arena of what the museum is all about. I sent Nina a brochure that describes the museum really from top to bottom, including an arena that I know you're interested in, and that is the genealogy arena. And if you want anything, any information about anything, any tour about any aspect of this multi-platform entity, please let us know. We will be really more than delighted to respond to your queries and to organize tours for you individually and for your families.
Shula, thank you. Thank you so very much. I did want to comment that our genealogy guru, Kim Chantel, did submit, I'm losing, the history of the Jews of Sarasota Manatee, and it's on your website. And thank you for allowing us to do that. I think that so many of us in Sarasota Manatee will become much more involved, and we're delighted to have our opportunity to have our community up on that board. And Shula, you've been wonderful to arrange this, and Lindsay for presenting. If there are no other comments from anyone, we'll say Toda Rabba, Lehitraot, Shalom, Shalom.
Labריאות.
Labריאות.
Bye.